That is one of the major strengths of neurodivergent people, is being able to think differently.
Yeah.
Often they'll bring the solutions that other people wouldn't necessarily bring to the table.
Especially when you're young and you're starting out and a lot of people don't really know what direction you want to go in or where you're supposed to go. I think it's more important to figure out, what do I enjoy? What are my strengths? What makes me feel like I'm contributing, and helps with that passion and a lot of the things like hyper-focus and that attention to detail. If you go and explore a career that you're genuinely interested in instead of just trying to do what you think's expected of you, you'll have a lot more energy naturally to go and pursue those things.
On this episode of SENsational, I'm joined by Helen Cullis and Josh Jones from Virgin Media O2 to discuss neurodiversity in the workplace. They share their insights on navigating work with neurodivergence and offer practical advice to help your child explore the opportunities available to them. This conversation happened thanks to our Futures team, who work with businesses and entrepreneurs to support every young person to plan their next step and prepare for the future they deserve. Before we dive in, I have a favour to ask. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. Your support helps us to reach more listeners and continue the important conversations about neurodiversity. Let's begin. So welcome, Josh and Helen. It's really nice for you to come and visit us today. As a parent of a child with additional needs, this has been something that's been on my mind for a while, and I've been really excited to talk to you because it is something that pops into your head every now and then when you're thinking about the future, when you're thinking about employability and skills and what your children are going to need when they're entering the world of work. So I'm wondering if I can ask, what are employees looking for when young people are first starting out in their employment journey?
I'm going to flip that question a little bit, I think. I think it's really important. I'm the mum of teenagers who are facing into their work journey soon. I think it's really important for the kids to understand what they're good at and where their strengths lie, because you can look at jobs and look at skills that employees are looking for, but if you're not aligned to them, it's going to be, it's going to be harder, I think. Yeah. So I think it's definitely, and particularly with neurodivergent children, playing to your skills and strengths and then seeing what's out there job-wise. That would be the first thing I would say. So I guess in terms of what employers are looking for, I can talk to, as a hiring manager myself, so I have a team within finance. And the first thing I will look for, obviously, are going to be technical skills. So how qualified is that person and how qualified do they need to be for the role? It could just be strong numeracy skills if it's a junior role, or it could be, qualified accountant. That's like one part of it. I've recruited people into my team who are not from accountancy backgrounds, but they've had the personal attributes. So they have experience in other areas or they've studied in other areas. And that's what's key to me when I recruit somebody is, will that person have the ability to adapt, and grow within the roles? Yeah. So some things can easily be taught. There's a lot of accountancy things that can be taught. You don't need to necessarily qualify as an accountant to do that. So that's one of the sides of it, technical skills, and that will vary obviously depending on roles. Obviously a lot of companies, and our business is one of them, do have apprenticeship schemes, so there's a lot of training within roles. So that's one part of it. And then problem solving and critical thinking is a really big part of it, I think. And I think that is one of the major strengths of neurodivergent people, is being able to think differently. Yeah. I sit in rooms with teams and, you can sort of see who's neurodivergent in the room, because often they'll bring the solutions that other people wouldn't necessarily bring to the table. So that's definitely a big part of it as well. Communication skills, and when I say communication skills, it doesn't mean sitting on a podcast or standing up in front of an audience in the workplace. It can be written communication, it can be visual, whatever that looks like, spoken. But I think being able to communicate is key. And I know that can be a challenge depending on, which neurodiverse condition somebody may have, and that's where supporting the workplace obviously comes in. But just being able to do that within teams is key. And then a big thing is just the willingness to learn and develop. So somebody who shows up and says, I might not have that exactly that you're looking for, but this is what I'm open to doing, or showing that they've done that before.
Fab. So how might employers support neurodivergent young people with recruitment or the onboarding process? What would that look like?
Yeah, I think definitely from my time in retail, so before starting my apprenticeship, I was a store manager in retail, and a lot of it is all about making sure you're creating the best environment for the people that you've got around you. So there's a lot of things you can do around sort of declaring you've got a disability or anything like that, or a neurodivergence. And yet you can put that forward, and you can ask for adjustments and sort of any other reasonable adjustments you can think of during that sort of interview process. Mm-hmm. So like a big part of it for me is if I was going to go into an interview and do one for someone's like a store advisor, it's, are you going to make sure that they've got any special requests? Are you going to make sure sort of the lighting's not too harsh in that room? There's a lot of really good guidance that we've got internally at Virgin Media O2 of where you get the right support to make sure that you set everyone up in the best possible way for the interviews.
I think I've heard of people even asking for questions in advance or asking for extra time and things like that. Is that the kind of thing you're saying?
Definitely, yeah. So especially with sort of my journey going into my apprenticeship, when I went through that application process, I was given a little bit of extra time to complete the tasks, and it gave me a load more, loads more confidence going into it to go, right, okay, I don't need to panic and I don't need to like get completely overwhelmed. Just take your time a little bit. And even if it's that little bit of extra time during the interview process, it lets you climatize to your situation a little bit better as well.
So it is super important, I would imagine, for people to think about getting in touch in advance, finding out what's available, but also knowing what you need and being able to communicate and advocate for yourself in that way.
Just going back to the question of how employees can support people through the recruitment process, that was it, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. So we also, as a business, I would say we're further on the journey maybe than other companies as well. So we have a partnership with recent partnership with an organisation called Even Break, who support disabled people getting into the workplace. We've joined up with them. We also have we have different avenues into the business, but our future careers, which I always get confused with the futures programme, but future careers as well, which is the apprenticeship, internship and graduate scheme. Even Break, it's not too dissimilar in terms of process, but it does require, like you said, disclosure. So saying that you need some adjustments within the interview process. But as soon as somebody presses that button in that process to say, I need some accessibility adjustments for that interview, they are then referred out to a third party. So what happens is they'll do an assessment with them and say, right, what do you need? It may be the environment, it may be the type of interview, but they will tailor it, and then that goes back to the hiring manager. So we have a really good process in place that means somebody can show up for that interview and they can just be themselves, and they haven't got all the other distracting factors, whether it be noise, lights, or what other pressures. And that means that they will come and, the person interviewing them will see them for who they are, not perhaps the stress that an environment may cause. And the Future Careers programme, that whole process is very much skills-based. So they don't even ask for a CV, I believe, for the apprenticeship scheme. It's just an application, and then you go through this step process, and there's even a coaching call in there as well to prepare you for the assessment. So all the steps along the way are around making sure that people do turn up and they can say, I'm really good at this. And there's an understanding as well, and particularly in our business, and I'd encourage other businesses to do this, really get to grips and understand what neurodiversity looks like or neurodivergence looks like for people. Because, if somebody comes into our process and perhaps, they're stimming or there's a lack of eye contact, people in our business are educated enough to know that may indicate, it may indicate a particular neurodivergence. And that's all right. Yeah. We're not going to sit there and say, well, that person didn't give me eye contact. They're obviously not interested in the role, or they were distracted. They're not. It's actually, well, I understand that this person has declared that there is a neurodivergent condition, and therefore we understand it. Because I think, I don't know, a lot of people will see something like that and just be like, oh, why are they doing that? And without that understanding. So I definitely encourage employers to educate themselves so that they understand what that looks like, and why that might be the case.
It would allow people to be their best, to come into that environment and be their best, but also know that they can have the confidence to ask and be supported and feel like their needs are taken seriously. And then having that interview process, seeing it all reflected back, the way that they've been able to advocate for themselves, just starts on the right foot, doesn't it? It starts that journey really well on the right foot. Yeah,
and we were talking about this the other day, to be fair. There's a lot of, I think when it comes down to it, when you're looking at opportunities and you're looking to sort of make those moves in your career, that a lot of the time companies will advertise as like disability confident employers. And I know for me, definitely moving around internally, like in the past 2 or 3 years, I've had about 4 different roles. And I know that every time I go into it, in the back of my mind, I know there's going to be those adjustments there from someone going through that process already.
Yeah.
So it gives me a bit more confidence to try new things. And like even in the fire service, like quite a while ago now, when I first came out of college, I wanted to apply to the fire service. And one of the major things for me when I looked at it was like, oh, if you do have a disability and you want to declare that, then you can be sort of guaranteed you get through to at least the assessment stage. So I thought, right, there's a lot less pressure on me now to make sure that I absolutely nail this online application, because I'm going to at least be able to show up and show my true self and what I can bring to it. So a lot of it's about on that actual application form itself, whether they're saying these you do have the option to do it, or we are a disability confident employer, because it gives a lot of young people that confidence to actually try and go for something they might not have done otherwise. Yeah,
it's not a term I've heard before, that disability confident employer. It's definitely one that I think I'll kind of take away and share. It's definitely something to look out for. So I appreciate that. Yeah.
There is a tip as well I talk to my sons about, and it's like, if you want to see how neuro-inclusive a business is, just Google that business and put neurodiversity after the name and see how far it takes you to find out anything. I did this with our business before we did the podcast, before I said it. So I was like, I need to actually test this out, and it's there. But, I think that's a really good test around. It's not to say that wouldn't be the right business if you can't find that information, but I think it's a really good indicator of how inclusive and seriously, their commitment is to inclusion in this space.
It's a brilliant tip, that. So it's a really good thing to bear in mind, both of those tips, actually thinking about disability confident employers and doing those additional little searches just to see how confident they are in supporting additional needs. Yeah, really helpful. We're really lucky in our podcast. We do have a lot of interaction and engagement with our audience. So we've got a question from one of our parents, if that's all right, to come up next. So you're going to have to forgive me. I'll have to read from the iPad because it's quite a lengthy question, but a really important one, I think. So what advice might you give for my autistic son, who's 17 years old, for being upfront and owning his condition? He's mastered his way through high school. He's a very high academic achiever, but experiences such devastating burnout in the evenings and weekends. How can he avoid taking this into his job and career? I'm worried people won't understand him, which from a parent point of view, I can really feel that and I really kind of echo that sentiment. So I'm really interested into what you'd say about that.
Okay, I'm going to probably break that out into a few parts. So I think the first part of that is disclosure. And it sounds like the parent would like them to do that, would like to disclose because they feel perhaps that there would be an easier path for them. They get more support by doing so. I would say disclosing your neurodivergence is a very, very personal thing to somebody. I've had a few instances where people in the business have come to me and said, I'm having these problems with my manager and they don't know that I have ADHD. And at the moment, they're really questioning my performance. And we talked about maybe some of the labels that was generating for them and why they didn't want to disclose their neurodivergence and the ADHD. And they said, well, I think it'll go against my career. It'll go against me in my career. They were on the graduate program and they were like, I don't want to be seen differently. And so we had a chat then and I said, so would you rather be seen as somebody who perhaps is not very good at the job and failing in certain aspects, or disclose the fact that you have ADHD and the business then has a process to step in and support you with adjustments to make it accessible? Some of those adjustments really simple as well. And so we had that conversation around, well, it's either this or this.
Yeah, turn it around, think about it in a different way. And that's a really helpful way to think about it, actually, isn't it?
It is, because I think, and we could talk about labels all day, and I know some people don't like them or refer to them as that, but actually I see them, as it's access to what you need to be able to do something. And this person in this instance did go and have a discussion with the manager, and they did get some just really simple things around the way they work or the way they were studying put into place. And it just changed, the performance changed because prior to that, they didn't have the right tools in place to do it. So the disclosure thing, I think, is I'm for and against it. I think it really depends on who, the 17-year-old is and who, there is a feeling that he needs to disclose to. And I do think it has to be that individual's choice. I'll just give you another very quick example. my son is learning to drive at the moment, and he's had to change instructor. And I said, why don't you maybe mention to them about, your neurodivergent condition, and it may just help them understand how to communicate with you better. And he said to me, no, what I'll do is I'll explain how he needs to teach me. So rather than say I am, or, whatever, I'll actually say to him, this is the way in which, if you explain this to me this way, I will learn better.
Yeah.
And he's flourishing with it. So there's very different ways to look at it. But I do understand that, and I think I may be speaking out of turn, but from what I've seen, like with my children, it's more open around, people are more open around it than maybe when I was at school talking about it. So I would feel that there should be more psychological safety, which is a key part. So I don't know about encouraging them to disclose. It's maybe addressing some of the reasons why they don't feel comfortable disclosing, and maybe saying, well, okay, we'll talk through and walk through those scenarios, like each in turn. The second thing I was going to say is around burnout. And me and Josh were talking about this the other day, and I suffer with burnout terribly. And I think it's one of the things I do is I look at my week ahead and go, right, what's coming up? If I've got travel, we were just talking, you were in London the last 2 days. Yeah. If I've got travel, I know that I will need downtime after that to regulate, and I won't be able to do too much. I'm very open with my friends that I'll probably cancel things because I hit burnout, but I just try to plan ahead. I think I don't know anybody who's neurodivergent who doesn't experience burnout, and I think it is something you have to self-manage as much as you can. The environment's never going to be fully adapted to, in my view anyway, to neurodivergence. We can change it in certain ways, but I think you've got to really sit and think about, okay, what I've got uni on this week, or I've got these events on and this. When am I going to hit burnout? And I talk to my kids around seeing energy as cash. It's the currency, and how much energy am I going to need to do these things? So unfortunately, I think it does take that self-planning and self-awareness to manage that. Yeah. That's a really long answer.
No, definitely. And it's a lot of really good points. And I think from my perspective, being sort of like a younger person in the workplace coming through and not really feeling comfortable saying anything sort of like, oh, I've got ADHD, I've got autism and things like this. Every time I've gone into a situation where I think, oh, I shouldn't say it, or I should sort of just keep it under wraps, it's all times it's sort of like I've got these unspoken expectations as to where it's like, okay, I need help, but I don't want to ask for the help. And I've really found on my apprenticeship, especially over the past 12 months, every time I've gone into a conversation, I've been able to be a little bit vulnerable, and I thought, okay, my intuition, I can trust this person a little bit. And I've sat down and had the conversations, and I've gone, listen, I just want to have a bit of a chat and a catch up of how I can get a bit more support because I'm struggling with this specific thing. There hasn't been a single time that someone's turned around to me and they've gone, oh, what are you talking about? No, there's no such thing as that, or we can't support you with this. Every single person that I've spoken to over the past, especially sort of like 18 months, they've gone, yeah, no, 100%, I understand where you're coming from, and let's see how we can work through it together. So I think especially in terms of overcoming that barrier of feeling like you might not be able to declare it and sort of and put it out there, a lot of the time you'll be able to sort of gauge the person you're speaking to and how receptive they're going to be of it anyway. And it does take a little bit of bravery to sort of put yourself out there and say, look, this is me, this is who I am. But it's not you and your condition, it's just your brain works in a little bit of a different way. It's not like there's nothing that completely separates you from everyone else. You need a little bit more support. You could also have a little bit more freedom. And I think a big part of that is trusting it one bit at a time. If it's just a friend you can speak to about it and then build yourself up to a co-worker and then potentially a line manager, if you have that approach of where step by step, you just gain a little bit of confidence at a time, it really helps you sort of be in a position and realize, oh, actually, everyone's here to support me. And weirdly enough, a lot of people resonate with it every time we speak about it. And especially, well, the best example I can give you with all of this is Helen's done a lot of the work over the past couple of years with the Neurodiversity Network internally. My first journey into it of really exploring myself was from a lot of the things you were sharing at the time. And it's sort of, when you look at it and you go, oh, other people are sharing their story and what's going on with them, and I resonate with that. And you'll find a lot of people in the workplace, when you start disclosing it, they'll go, oh, actually, no, I feel like that sometimes as well. And I can understand how that would be difficult for you. And it isn't as, it's a bit like that imposter syndrome thing, isn't it? Like it's not as different. You're not as out of the box. It's everyone just struggles in their own different way and has their own different strengths. And I think it's by doing that and taking that staggered approach, you can really gain that confidence to be in a position where you can turn around and own it. And like I've said, every time I've mentioned it previously, I've been really surprised with how receptive everyone's been and how supportive they've been of it.
Oh, I really appreciate both of you actually sharing those personal experiences, because, you know, it's quite tricky to kind of be open and have that out there. But I suppose finding that network within work, be it a supervisor, a line manager, or just a colleague who might be able to have that initial conversation, support you with your confidence and take those next steps, seems really important. Helping to plan, organise your week, your day, thinking about burnout and things in the future. And then, you know, perhaps having those conversations outside of the workplace first about the security that you feel in and around disclosing or not disclosing your diagnosis will prepare you for some of those perhaps trickier conversations, or maybe hopefully the experience that you've had, not so tricky conversations with people who might be there to support you, are some steps that perhaps our parent can take with their young person going forward. So I really appreciate that. Thank you. When we're thinking about neurodivergent young people, can we specifically think about what's available out there for them and what they should be thinking about when they're getting into the world of work, particularly from that neurodivergent point of view?
Yeah, I think it's something that we were speaking about, and it's especially when you're young and you're starting out and a lot of people don't really know what direction you want to go in or where you're supposed to go. I think it's more important to figure out what works for you, what's important to you, and just have a bit of a list and go, what do I actually enjoy? What are my strengths? What do other people say about me in terms of, like, if I were to go and speak to a parent or a friend, what would they say they like about me? What are my strengths? So what do I enjoy? What are my strengths? What gives me, and it's like what Helen was saying a minute ago with energy, what makes me feel like I'm contributing and helps with that passion, and a lot of the things like hyper-focus and that attention to detail. If you go and explore a career that you're genuinely interested in instead of just trying to do what you think's expected of you, you'll have a lot more energy naturally to go and pursue those things. So, yeah.
So I think in terms of support for young people entering the world of work, neurodivergent young people, I mean, I can talk to what we do and what's within our business. So one of the things we have, for instance, is our neurodiversity network. I think we've already mentioned that, which, like, we have about 16,000 employees in the business. Wow. And our network is growing and growing, and we've got about 1,200 people in that at the moment. So we have that, and that's a really safe space. It's a channel we have on our internal sort of system, intranet system, and we share lots of information on there. There's lots of events and things like that. So if somebody comes into the workplace, joins Virgin Media O2, they will see that immediately. And there's lots of people within that. We have people contacting us all the time for advice and guidance and things like that. So that's sort of one step, I think, is we have a community. And I'll say, like, going back 5 years, when I joined that community, we probably had like 50, 100 people in there, and it's grown. Is
it just for neurodivergent employees, or is it information for everybody? What does that look like?
So it's for everybody. Oh, anyone could join. Like, neurodiversity covers everybody. It includes neurotypical people as well, but we obviously focus on supporting neurodivergent people. But it's open to everybody.
Wow.
So and that's really important as well from an allyship point of view. You know, we really push a lot of things around educating people, like managers as well. And sort of, without going off topic, but I think we have people in the business who are just expected, who maybe have never come across what neurodiversity is, and they may have somebody in the team who comes in who has a particular condition, and they're expected to know what to do, and we're like, well, you can't just expect somebody to know. So there is, you know, we have training in place. That's one of the things I was going to come on to. We have training in place for managers. We have training in place for anyone in the business that wants to understand neurodiversity. Plus, we have this network, which I think is really important. So I think if somebody was coming in, that's what they would see. We also have workplace adjustments. I don't really like calling them reasonable adjustments. I like to think of them as accessibility adjustments that enable somebody to be able to do the job. It's that equity v equality diagram where, you know, you make sure everybody has the same opportunity. So we have a third party we use who will do an assessment. So somebody comes in and declares a condition. They will go and have this assessment with a company called Microlink, who were great. They will come back with a report which goes to the manager and the employee, and then we put those adjustments in place. And that could be like software, it can be working patterns, it can be location of work. There's so much that we can do, and as a business we really embrace that, because we want to make sure that people are able to do the job to the best of their ability. You know, why would we not want that? So I'm trying to think around some of the other things we do.
Well, there's a lot of stuff in terms of like neuro-inclusive meeting guides, but
yeah,
I think a big part of it for me and my experience with Microlink, it was great when I moved roles, because it's not just about new people coming into the business as well on that sort of early career pathway. I had the option of moving internally, where I was asked, do you have any reasonable adjustments you'd like to be made? And as part of it, I had access to ADHD coaching, which at the time, going from that transition where everything's just really busy and it's in person, you're working in a retail store, to then sort of working from home and you're a lot more accountable to managing your own workload, being able to sit down with someone and have like one-on-one coaching to go, okay, well, this is how we can best organize your day. And then this is how you can sort of manage your emotions. And not only that as well, it was a great support tool for you to work through it. And I think that in conjunction with everything else that sort of we do as a business in terms of have best practice guides out there. So when you look at going into those meetings, it's the neuro-inclusive meeting guides. So you can sort of set that expectation with everyone. And as well, we've got the employee passports. So when it comes back to that disclosure, and you might not necessarily feel like saying to everyone and going, look, oh, I have a neurodiversity, you can put it on your internal HR profile and declare it, and that your line manager can be aware of it. And then if you move to somewhere else within the business, then the line manager will be able to see that as well. So it's sort of, if you're not overly comfortable having that conversation, it's a nice way of being able to have it on there and document the sort of support and the different things that you can do to make sure that you're successful when you move into a new team, which can be quite overwhelming in the first place anyway.
Yeah, definitely.
It's so hugely encouraging to know positive steps that are being taken out there, and one business at a time. You know, you were saying earlier that you'd like to encourage other businesses to take that on board, but just encouraging, knowing that there is a bit of a map and a plan already out there with what you guys are doing at Virgin Media O2. And we're just wondering, it kind of like flows on to the next question that we've been thinking about. In general, what does an inclusive workplace look like, or what should an inclusive workplace look like?
I mean, if you're thinking about specifically neuro-inclusion, you know, you've got to be thinking about your systems, your processes, your environment, your policies that you have in place, and how inclusive they are to people who are neurodivergent. That is what we focus on, and we drive a lot of that from the network. Even though we're like volunteers and we all come together, we've made change happen in the business. So one of the things which is a big step forward for us, for instance, our healthcare policy, we pushed and championed to have diagnostic assessment put into our Bupa policy that our employees have access to, and that got put into place in January. So, I mean, I would say we're probably further on the journey than other businesses, but that's one example. Another example is we have started designing. We've got a new office in London, in Paddington, and that's been designed in a neuro-inclusive way. So the environment is very much tailored to try to meet sensory needs. It's not overwhelming. We have this fantastic thing called retreat rooms. So if people need downtime, you know, if there's overwhelm or whatever, they just need to take some time out. There are retreat rooms which are designed specifically for that. Like we said about the neuro-inclusive guides, so meeting guides, hiring guides, what to do if somebody discloses that they have a neurodivergent condition. We have lots of things like that, and a lot has been driven from our network into the business, but the business absolutely fully embraces it. You know, we are really we shine a light on, we think you've got a gap here. But I would say for other businesses, it can be as simple as just, do you know what, getting adjustable lighting in your building to take away some of that sensory overstimulation. It can be looking at working patterns. It can be improving communication. I mean, the meeting guide we keep referencing goes back, real old school methods of communication. Have an agenda, you know, have meeting minutes, have clear actions. All of those things seem to have been lost over the years. And we stated that to you know, people in the business produce this guide, and actually the overwhelming response has been from everyone that this is really helpful.
I would imagine,
But that costs nothing, that information's out there. But maybe just think about breaking it into, like I say, going back to systems, processes, environment, people, policies, and think about, does this include everybody? And if it doesn't, what can we do differently? And there are so many resources out there for people to tap into. These things don't need to cost money.
And I think what came into my head when you were just talking there is, take the first steps, take some steps. And I imagine some of those early steps will lead to bigger things, bigger changes in process, because it might feel overwhelming as a business who might be, joining us today, listening in today. Oh, it seems like a lot to do to change the policies, the practices and all that kind of stuff. But if you start taking those small initial steps, even some of those very early stage steps can have a huge difference to neurodivergent people.
Yeah. And it's such a good point that you've raised before as well. Making those changes for neurodivergent people, they benefit the entire workplace.
Absolutely,
it's not just about sort of making sure that you're having a more neuro-inclusive space there. Adding more structure and better methods of communicating and being more aware of everyone's needs, that benefits everyone. And that's something that you've been quite strong about.
Yeah.
And it's true, because by having those meeting agendas and by having those sort of set expectations, everyone, whether you're neurodivergent or neurotypical, everyone benefits from that in the workplace. So even if you think you're going to have to go out and spend money and find extra resources, it's not just for a select group of your workforce, it is for everyone.
Yeah, that's really important to actually acknowledge, and I appreciate you saying that, because all of us at some point or other do experience those stresses, those pressures, and it might be externally from things that are going on in your life that you might bring into the workplace, or it might be because of workplace things that are happening. But any adjustments to support everybody will kind of benefit everybody, like you've said. So
yeah, I was just going to add to that as well, in terms of any businesses which are really early on in the journey. LinkedIn obviously is a great resource. There are so many employee groups out there within different businesses. I have people reach out to me and say, we're looking to do this in our business and we're really at the early stages. Can you support with that? And I will. I obviously have to limit it, or else I wouldn't really have much time to do my day job and everything else. But I think don't be afraid to reach out to people who are already doing it. People have already done the work. Have a look who's out there and leverage what they've done.
Yeah, the blueprints are there, aren't they?
Exactly.
Really?
Yeah. Don't reinvent the wheel with it. There is so much out there for people to do, but it is, like you say, it's taking that first step. And you know what? A big saying I have is, don't let perfection stand in the way of progression, because you might not get it right, but the intention is, if the intention is good, and you have a path that you want to go down, then just do it anyway. It doesn't have to be perfect.
I love that message. It's really, that's a really important message, and it's really, I suppose, one to take away for people who are really at the beginning of that first journey to thinking about a neuro-inclusive workplace. So to end our episode, I've learnt loads today, and unfortunately we do have to end here, but I'm wondering, is there a myth about neurodiversity in the workplace that you would like to take the opportunity to debunk right here and now for us?
I think a big myth that I'd like to debunk is that having neurodivergent people in the workplace could affect teams negatively, because I don't think that's the truth at all. And it's been proven sort of time and time again in different studies. By having a more diverse team and having more neurodivergent people in your team, a lot of the times you're actually creating the perfect environment for that communication that's needed, and you can be straight to the point and you can find a resolution that works for everyone in a really, really constructive way. So yeah, I think that's a massive thing, is to stop looking at it from, is that going to cause any issues, or could that cause problems, and instead see how much benefit you can gain from having a more inclusive workspace and having all these different people with all the different skills, like the pattern recognition, the attention to detail, the enhanced empathy when sort of supporting other team members. It's really, really important to sort of look at it and also look at the data as well and see just how much it can improve your workspace.
Absolutely. I love that message. Helen?
Yeah, sort of similar really to Josh's. I think it's this misconception about employing people who declare a neurodivergent condition, that it's going to be problematic, it's costly. Like, why would I do that? It's just, and they see it as a negative. And actually, I think we've already said around some of the things that businesses can do to create accessibility are, really simple and don't cost a lot and benefit everybody. So that's one part of it. But I do think, very similar to what you were saying, Josh, what you gain from having a mixture of brains, as I'll call it, or different flavours of brains in your teams or in your workforce, that's how businesses grow. When you look at some of the really successful people out there, Richard Branson for one, one of the the Virgin brand, started the Virgin brand. I mean, he's dyslexic and he will talk to how he struggled academically because he was dyslexic and didn't have the support in place. Yet he's quite iconic, really, in what he's been able to achieve. And I think, I'm not saying everybody is going to be a Richard Branson and everybody's going to be an entrepreneur, but a lot of the people out there who are doing that, they are neurodivergent, and you really want those people in your teams. There's evidence out there that says around growth in sales, how businesses grow by having a neurodivergent workforce. So what I would say is, rather than see it as a negative, there are so many positives. I have neurodivergent people within my team, and I have done in other roles, and my teams work best with that mix. You get the different ideas, whether it's from somebody who's neurotypical or neurodivergent. But I think, rather than see it as a negative, there are so many strengths that people can bring to a workforce if you make, you deal with the things that need to be done with accessibility, as you would with anything else. So,
Helen, Josh, thank you so much for joining us on SENsational today. I've genuinely learned lots about neurodiversity in the workplace and the future steps about neurodiversity in the workplace, and I really appreciate your expertise and thoughts. Thank you very much.